But I've been walking down the path of actually writing a book for about 7 or 8 years now. And so I went to my first writing conference in 2015. And that was when I, connected with a literary agent and found out what a literary agent is and does, and what this whole path of traditional publishing actually looks like. And so, to somebody who has that dream, it's not going to happen overnight. At least for most people, it doesn't. And so I think taking one step of obedience after the other, that's at least been my story. I've interviewed some people lately for the podcast who, something happened, and God saw fit to expand their platform and their territory much more quickly than mine. And that just wasn't my story. So
Right.
I spent several years really just seeking the Lord for direction, and one, what to write, and how could I use my gifts most fully to speak into the lives of readers. But it has been a long journey for me, and one that I think, I can weave a thread through the majority of my life, and it makes sense that this is the path that I'm on. But that's a little bit of the story.
There you go. Now, how long did it take to write the book once you got started?
So I signed my contract with my publisher last August of 21, and my book was due in March. So I had 8 or 9 months, which is actually a pretty long time. I would say on average you have about six to eight at most. And so they gave me a pretty good chunk of time, which I was so grateful for. So start to finish, it'll be about a year and a half.
Okay. Now, this question, I've talked to other authors and people who've gone through this process. I'm really curious what your take is on this. So, what is the process? What was the process like for you getting this book published?
Yeah. So like you said, everybody's story is different, and there's no right or wrong path to being published. In my story, I connected with my now literary agent back in 2015 when I went to my very first writing conference. I thought I was ready to write a book at 22 years old and thought I had the best book proposal that the world had ever seen. And she informed me that I, in fact, did not. And I had a lot of work to do. And I now shudder at the thought of the book I would have written at 22, right? And like you're talking about, just and how much the Lord grows us and refines us over the years. And I'm so grateful for that. So I went in 2015. I went back to that same conference in 2018, took another proposal, got rejected again. Still felt like it was on my heart and something that God had led me to do. I just didn't know the timing of it. And so it was after I married my husband. And like we talked about at the very beginning of this episode, God had really opened up my capacity to take on more ministry projects like this. I reconnected with my agent in mid to late 2020, after the podcast had kind of gotten off the ground. And it was at that point that I signed with her, and we worked on my book proposal and refining the message of the book and really getting that right before we shopped it around to different publishers. And then, let's see, spring of 21, we pitched it to probably about 20 different publishing houses.
Mm,
And it was another one of those moments where God made it abundantly clear who my partner was supposed to be in bringing this into the world. We had a few take interest in the message, and we even had a couple of calls that, most authors would be so thrilled to have with a publisher. And I remember the day I called my agent after one of them, and the call had went very well. It just wasn't for me. And
yeah.
I remember calling her and saying, I just feel so at peace about saying yes to David C. Cook. That's who I'm working with right now. And so we did, and it was later that summer that I signed my contract. And so, long and short, it's been a long, long journey, but God's been so faithful to just make the steps really clear.